Today, we're talking about the Callisto Protocol, a game that could have been the next-gen survival horror, bringing all the best elements from Dead Space, Resident Evil, Evil Within to it, and it's not like it didn't have enough bumpers along the way to show how people truly enjoy survival horror today. Headed by a new studio, Striking Distance, led by Mr. Glenn Schofield from Dead Space, so if you're looking for the above, honestly, I don't think it hits the mark. It's meh, and I'm going to break down why, so let's get right into it. As we mentioned, if you're looking for Dead Space, that spiritual successor, there are similarities with the music, sound, some quests and storylines, and functional things that do stay the same, like this stomping, stasis, light dismemberment, and, as we mentioned, the story. But let's move past the story part for now, because honestly, it doesn't really do much that's true unique. As usual, welcome to the Wook Reviews, where we give you some context about games that we're playing, what we thought along the way, and we have a bit of a breakdown matrix to arrive to our final conclusion score that we'll put in at the end, just so that you can get a little bit of a summarized view of what we thought. Today, as we mentioned, it's the Callisto Protocol, a game that I've been waiting for far too long, and yeah. So the game starts and you're Jacob. He's a pilot that crash lands on Callisto and is thrown right into it. The start of the game is strong. You are smashing faces in with a crowbar early. It's visceral. Everything that you'd want in that game, and it's harsh. Playing on the hardest difficulty, you get slapped around more times than a ham on Thanksgiving, but it's not hams, maybe it's turkeys. I don't know. You get the point. You get hit hard, and it is. You feel it. My impression was, throughout the game's time, hours 0 to 2 were pretty great. The graphics, sound design, enemies, they look threatening. There were some instances where I had to replay the same enemies over and over again just so that I could truly get the idea of how they play, feel, and hopefully not to get hit in that encounter, and I died a lot. Hours 2 through 4 was the same, but with some weapons, and that's where the problem starts to lie. It's the same, and once you figure it out, it just, the enjoyability layer, it kind of dies a little bit. And hours 4 through 10, it was actually more about a 7.5-hour campaign with some slow moments, but I did like using the shotguns. They stood out to me only because I got out of the monotony of swinging, waiting, and swinging again. So let's start with the good. The atmosphere. This is something that you truly need to play the game to appreciate. However, to explain simply, you feel like you are there. Dread fills you as much as every time that you march to your destination, and there are some genuine creepy moments. Every biome that you're in feels like you're there, and I can praise that it truly does hit that mark. There's a snowy map that left me with a similar feeling as watching The Thing for the first time, and that eerie feeling has not really been something that I felt ever. I mean, it was great. The way that your character cuts through the snow, the way that there are frozen enemies, you know that they're going to pop out, but it still creeps you out. It's great. The sound design is phenomenal, but stereo headphones were a bit wonky. I've got a Logitech X Pro, which are not bad headphones by any means, but it just sounded like I was surrounded by enemies a lot, grunting, panting, but no discernible locations sometimes, but it does hit the mark. It's what you expect, and it does do its job. Along with all the other ambient noises that do pop up, and some of the, not forgettable noises that all the actors make. I mean, Jacob and Josh, the actor himself, does a terrific job, but we'll get there a little bit later. The death animations as well. This was a staple for the game's marketing, and what it does is the best analogy I can make is that it's a bunt. You're making it to first base, but you didn't even swing. It gets pretty repetitive very quickly. General ideas that were cool in the game, and these are just ideas, not necessarily fundamental gameplay changes or gameplay ideas, whatever it might be, but you make guns via schematics and then it 3D prints them. I mean, it looks really cool every time that you make a new gun. Love it. When you change weapons, you see the character actually swaps to the head from the base that is the grip. So you load from, weapon A to weapon B. You're physically changing the weapons versus just having, an arsenal on your back, and then you load them. Also cool. Your character makes some audible sounds when they run out of ammo. And back to the acting, but from every actor that was involved, it was top notch. You can see the emotion on their faces, and then the death animations going back to them. But they truly are spectacular when you think about the actor making those faces and grunts as they are being ripped apart by these plague infested things. It's solid. Now on to the not so good. Now keep in mind, it is just my opinion, but I hope if you haven't played the game, it may help you shape an opinion of should I buy this at least now or wait a little bit. So some of the summary of things that we're going to talk about. We've got questing, enemy variety, AI combat, upgrade systems, and more. But generally, the core gameplay loop is what we're going to talk about for the not so good. The above good things were the atmosphere, sense of dread, and unfortunately, the things that aren't so good are really what makes a game fun or not. At the end of the day, even if you're playing a survival horror, you still want to have fun doing so and not get old of it. So first, questing. It's a very linear quest. You've got a direct location to go to. And unlike Dead Space, they didn't have like a map marker for you to follow, but that's just because they truly only give you one path down the river that you can go down. The side quests are literally a door to the left or to the right, or maybe a crack in the wall, but that's the extent of the side path. You go to B, get some credits ammo, and I think there was one schematic for a new gun, but that was only happening once. So there's not much there. Enemy variety. I'm really hoping that this changes, whether or not it's with DLC or with something else. But you have melee enemies with 1 or 2 movesets. They either swing twice or 3 times. You dodge those, smack them. A ranged spitball character that, shoots something at you, some acid, but acid doesn't do any damage, which is a little bit strange. I mean, would have been cool if they had something where if you got hit, it actually does a damage over time to you. Some brutes and a mid-game tough enemy that was very cool. I mean, the design is awesome, but they show up 2 or 3 times in the game. They just get placed there in narrow locations, and that's about it. The enemies have a mutated state that can allow them to do heavy damage, but they're just bullet sponges, and it doesn't fundamentally change the way that they attack you. If you miss a dodge, there's a chance on the hardest difficulty that you just die in one shot, and that's it. AI pathing is very strange. It doesn't do almost anything special. If you remember in Dead Space, those leapers, and I'm going to post a picture here, or the regenerator in RE4, that was dread the first time that you saw it. I mean, when one of those ran around you, the leapers, they ran into the vents, they jumped, they scurried away. You could chop off an arm, but they would still try to crawl towards you. They were used in conjunction with other characters to truly create an atmosphere of being swarmed by these enemies. It was all phenomenal. We have something like that here, but they're these really big creatures, so they're very easy to hit, and they can be simply taken out by using the stasis. So it's kind of odd, as a gameplay choice. They give you these very cool, invisible, ambushy-like creatures, but then they give you an ability that completely negates their entire purpose. And the sound design for these was pretty focused. I mean, it did sound great, but unfortunately, it just gave me an exact location as to where I'd blindly shoot the stasis and pick them up, which is just, it's counterintuitive to what makes it scary. So moving away from the AI, but that was something to be notable. I mean, even the pathing for some of the creatures that required stealth, it was a great sequence for the first 5 minutes, and 45 minutes into it, it got a little old, but they just pathed around the exact same location. You can't use guns, you just use a stabbing effect. And the biggest oddity of all is that you can stab these enemies. They make a screeching noise in your ear while they're dying and being stabbed in the stomach and neck, and the other enemies around them just continue to mosey around and not do anything. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why even put it there with this? At least have Josh cover their mouth or something, and I don't know, something to make sense of it, because it takes you out of the horror. The combat loop is simple. Once you upgrade your stun baton to have a heavy hit, you start with this light hit, but then once you have a heavy hit, you just attack either light, heavy, or maybe just heavy stomp. But it's light, heavy, dodge, light, heavy, depending on the enemy type. Tentacles break out. You either shoot the tentacles or you continue to melee, and then they transform, because unless you upgrade to it, there's no way to hit the tentacles with your melee weapon that the game is designed around, because why would they do that? Or even easier, you just go and you sprint in, you see one of the numerous environmental hazards, run in, heavy hit the enemy into the environmental hazard, and they die. It would have been cool, and this is something that maybe they can add in, or maybe for the second iteration of the game. It'd be very cool if you had the hazards that were spikes, for instance. because a spike is, it's hitting one portion of the enemy. You hit them into this hazard and maybe they don't die. Maybe that sparks some tentacles for some of the bigger enemies so that you can't just use the hazard on some of the hazards to get rid of and indispose the enemy immediately, but instead it amplifies this metamorphosis into the second form so that if you use the hazards too much, you might actually swarm yourself. That would be an interesting gameplay choice, because otherwise, and what you find that we end up doing is that you abuse the mechanic in some spots, because there's only a few spots in the game that you truly get swarmed. So they tried to add as well into the combat some cinematic moments with your pistol after smashing some enemies to dismember them, and you'll see it on the screen, but these moments pop up with a blue highlight where you can then quickly take your pistol out and shoot. But ironically, and this is another one thing that starts to get me with this game, is things are half-baked, is they went for cinematic, but then when you use these moments, they are so fast in a blink of an eye, you can't even really see what you're doing with the blue highlight, hitting these vital spots. So you miss out on everything that just was that fight sequence with the melee and then the vitals. You get what I'm saying, but it's just, there's some counterintuitive thoughts to me. And then combat also includes the stasis or telekinesis, like in Dead Space, like attacks. And once you start upgrading those, you throw enemies into those environmental hazards that are everywhere and in abundance, and you can dispose of the entire room quickly. I mean, seriously, how have they been on this planet and not had one of those signs up that says 0 days till incident? They would have no prisoners left at this point, because there's literally environmental hazards everywhere. One thing that also got me about just walking around is there's sequences where you are, one sequence you're walking along a bridge. Environmental hazards, you can push yourself in and kill yourself into this spinny blades of death, but I can't accidentally walk off the bridge. I just thought it was a little strange. A gust of wind. That sequence would have been cool if they just had something that was completely set up. It was one of those moments where just a button mashing. I can't remember what it's called, but it would have been so cool if on the bridge they actually had wind blowing, just so that you felt a little bit more immersed, because there were moments where the atmosphere was great, but the immersion was lost because I tried walking off the bridge and I can't. I mean, these games should be like roguelites. You continue to progress, but you constantly come back. Like, there needs to be a feeling of loss when you die, but there's really none aside from, and we'll get there, but the weird checkpoint system in the next minute. It's just strange. The dodge mechanic is unfortunately lazy to me. You either hold left or right and your character dodges. That's about it. You can't keep the same dodge for more than once in the same direction, so you need to go left, right, left, or add in a block once in a while, but block, you take damage. And the timing of it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, so it just seems, again, unnecessary. The part that gets me about combat is that they focused on melee, but it's clunky. As mentioning with the dodging, it's weird. The melee just flat out misses as it flies over an enemy's head. It's like I'm playing Resident Evil 2 with tank controls sometimes, where, if you shot but the enemy was slightly off to your left, that would miss. Or if the enemy was low, you actually had to aim low. That all made sense. But in this game, I can't aim my melee attack. I either swing or I swing at the same height, or I don't. And if the enemies are getting up, ironically, the direction of the swing doesn't change. So I can just swing right over the enemy's head with a heavy attack, and then they get an opportunity to attack me. It just makes no sense. And then similarly, I can't continue to knock them backwards if they're getting up. I need to wait for them to get up to a certain point before a knockback would ensue with a heavy attack. It's just odd, because they put all the focus on melee, but it seems like it's missing. And then on top of that, they have these invisibility frames, you could call them, where when I swing and I hit them, but if they're just about to start swinging, their animation will continue and you'll get hit anyways. Just odd. Next, it brings us onto the upgrade system. So you do get weapons, and there's about 5 primary weapons in the game. They're all unique, but only 2 of them are truly necessary. But it's just lacking. The alt-fire modes are very fun to use, but since there's no New Game Plus, you can't truly get enough credits to use them all, so you need to reload saves consistently to try out new weapons, or just wait another month for a New Game Plus in a single-player game that you would have expected a New Game Plus to be there, but anyways. And the other guns that you do upgrade, it just doesn't really make much sense, because, and this is kind of the odd thing, they have the tentacles in the game that come out, just like in Resident Evil 4, but it's, you know, 1 or 2 shots and they die. So if you have a shotgun, it blows them apart. If you got a pistol, it works. But then a gripe that we're going to get into, which is the big what moments, but like there's no quick weapon selection. Why? Why can't my D-pad be configured for quick weapon selection? So, a few big ones. Why is there a weird checkpoint system that throws you back 5 to 10 minutes like it's, you know, 2002 playing a Soldier of Fortune game just to let the save pick up from that spot? Why can't stasis pick up items like in Dead Space? It's like a telekinesis thing. It pulls enemies towards you. Why can't it pull items? It can only pull designated blue boxes. Why, oh why do enemies hit you like you're in a bad 80s kung fu movie where they literally stand right behind each other and not attack? Also makes no sense. But it's because they try to go for this one-on-one cinematic feel. But it's just strange because then you just get these mutated plague things just standing there doing nothing. And why do guns do minimal damage for dismemberment? I prefer to have, you know, and preferred to upgrade the baton, go ham versus using a pistol. And speaking of dismemberment, it doesn't have the same weight as Dead Space because you gave us a baton. Dead Space, what made it so great was the dread that ensued because you were afraid every time a necromorph came towards you. If one got in close vicinity, I would switch to the bigger weapon that I only had a few bullets for just to shoot them because I was afraid that any time I got hit, I would lose a substantial portion of my health pool and it would cause the next sequence to be difficult. But in Callisto, they went on the opposite route where they focused heavily on melee, which is very strange because you're a human facing off with these things that have massive spiked arms and legs and are eating people and can kill you in one shot. But it's like you're putting yourself into the heart of this danger and saying, I'm just going to keep dodging. It's just a weird choice. Like, you know, if we at least had weapons be impactful, so, you know, that shotgun blast, you only got 4 shells, but every time you shot it, it would completely take the enemy and blow their torso off. That would at least add to a need of using the baton. But otherwise, you know, and then you can put the mutated enemies at bay. Just an odd choice for how weak the melee system is in the game. I followed this game from the start about 2 years ago, and I find it difficult to not be disappointed. And you can probably hear it in my voice. Glenn had multiple dev diaries speaking about Dead Space mechanics that made it special. Most of them are lacking on those exact fronts. Aforementioned stasis, lack of weapons, dismemberment, being just not that necessary in this case. They nailed it on so many aspects of the atmosphere, and this is where the next video will be a testament to how well they've done that, but how that is only 50% of the game. The random natures of encounter in Dead Space made them all harrowing in their own right, and the enemy variety made them unique. In this case, with, let's say, the invisible enemies, the stasis dropped them at your feet, halt smash, they're gone. It could have been so incredible having these working in conjunction with other enemy types, but we needed some variety there. By the way, if you're enjoying the game or this review, shoot a comment below. We will certainly continue playing. It's hard not to put something out there after eagerly waiting for for 2 years after seeing this. And it's hard not to put some comments in about things that I honestly thought were no-brainers through the development cycle and were there through dev diaries. In summary, I feel the game's incomplete. I'm not one to assume and speculate, but I'm going to right now. I can't honestly feel like it was the developers themselves that felt like the game was wholly ready to go. There must have been other things missing because there are just so many functions of like games that were all referenced. This isn't me just talking. This is them saying, these are the included functions in the game that are just missing wholly from what would make this game much better. I mean, the pacing was great. There was a lot of great things, but a lot of miss. If I were to give her, a final number at the end, it's truly about a big 6 out of 10. The game hits atmospheric elements, but misses the game. With the story in mind, I'm very excited, at least for round 2 of Callisto. But I'm nervous on how they're going to take that, whether or not it's a DLC or a sequel. There's a lot of functionality that I would like to see added to the game or amended before new content is there. I do appreciate that there's a hardcore and a new game plus, but I do find it also insane that is not there on release for a game that's single player only. I mean, it's not like we're in a lull of games right now. You've got God of War that people are going to be playing for 40 hours, not 9. It has the New Game Plus coming as well, but I mean, you don't even really need it in that game because of how much content there truly is. You've got other games like Call of Duty that are there, and it is taking a share of your public. Doesn't matter what you say, they are taking it. And the fact that you don't give people a second, like a reason to continue playing. There's a Dead Space remake coming out that has a lot of the functionality that I'm talking about right now. That honestly, I thought they could have just blatantly taken and use some of the new aspects of that game to make this better. And then there's the Resident Evil 4 remake that truly looks phenomenal as well and is an additive to the original game, which was already incredible. So it just seems misplaced in the release cycle and also why they pushed it out with some missing functionality in general. I'm looking forward to it with a cautious lens now, a lot more so than I had previously. If you are looking for a game to play, it may do it for you for survival horror. It's low on the action route, as everything is a movie scene, and dodges become far too repetitive to be considered action sequences. But if you are looking for something tense, something that will fill you up in that sense of horror, this game, it may work for you. I may be being overly critical. So you could give it a shot, but the best thing you can do is look at multiple reviews, make that consensus, decision based off of that. And who knows, maybe you can just play it for 2 hours and return it on Steam. Not that I really advocate for that because it doesn't support the developers, but it might be the best way to truly understand whether or not you'll like it and continue playing. Aside from that, it's kind of a partial recommendation, only if the things that I mentioned don't really matter, like combat and the gameplay loop. That being said, this is the Wook Reviews, Wookie Bandit. We're live on Twitch on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We just play variety games, but for the most part, I love doing game reviews. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed just diving in and trying to dissect what went into a game.